for true.
Welcome to Duality Check, the podcast where two brothers embark on a journey through the realms of scientific inquiry, the mysteries of the past, and the uncharted realms of spirituality. Join us as we explore the wonders of our world and beyond, all while embracing the roles of curious bystanders rather than experts. Together, we'll unravel the tapestry of existence, blending the dichotomies of knowledge and wonder. Get ready to question, ponder, and delve into dualities that shape our understanding of reality on Duality Check. I'm Drew.
And I'm Dean, and we are on episode 28 today.
Welcome back for the 28th episode, or welcome to the first episode if you're just clicking on us for the first time.
Yeah, right?
So get that out of the way. Check us out on YouTube and Rumble and Instagram, Facebook. If you like it, like it. If you don't like it, just like it anyway. It ain't gonna hurt you.
For sure. All right, so today we're going to do part 2, talk some more about the Cosmic Summit, which I think we're going to at least need a part 3 for, because I've still barely scratched the surface on those videos. That's a lot of video content. Yeah, and a lot of these we just ramble because it's all just stuff we're interested in. It just happens. That's why there's a lot of part 1 through whatever in a lot of ours, because we just like to riff. And well, it's also fun, like, once you get interested in a topic, to like stay on that topic for a little while, dive a little bit deeper as you can, or like in the idea of like covering a book and spending more time on the different chapters you're covering. I think it's fun.
Absolutely. So before we get into the Cosmic Summit, though, we're gonna do some tangenting right off the beginning, right out the gate.
We got some news, we got some comments, we got some random stuff that we were talking about right when we realized, why aren't we pressing record and talking about this?
Exactly. So we could do that first, since it'll probably be easiest. So I guess we'll read the comment first, because it leads into it.
Okay.
So the comment we got was, I don't know if they didn't say we can use their name or anything, but I guess the YouTube handle doesn't matter.
Yeah.
At Dangerous Davies 2008, he writes, thanks for this. I've been thinking about the 26-27 event, which is hinted among the disclosure movement. And this was a comment on the Chris Bledsoe story, part 1 on episode 12.
Yeah.
We appreciate that. And I assume that the 26-27 event is, before I pulled this article up, was the
2026 prophecy from the White Lady about Easter
and
like revelations happening.
It's like the end of the era. Feminine energy will reign. I don't know. Yeah, what she said. Go listen to the episode.
That's when like we're supposed to find out about what's happening, I think was what it was.
Right. Yeah. It was kind of like her own disclosure.
Yeah, so he's talking about this, and it had me thinking, I was like, what other sources are there for that? Not that I'm trying to get myself into another end of the world like prophecy hype train. Like,
it doesn't say the end of the world, though.
We've had 2 of those in my life already.
Yeah, this one doesn't necessarily. It does talk about like weird times ahead.
I mean, well, it talks about like a decision we have. Like, there's like a crossroads, right? Coming up where, we can kind of grow up and move forward, or we can devolve,
continue where the path we're going down
of destruction. And
or we have there's a time, and this is the time when they say, so when Dean asked if there's other sources, I looked up roughly what that was about, and I found this article in Sci-Fi magazine. It's sci-fi.com. Aliens will reveal themselves in 2027, claims of former CIA agent John Ramirez. And so they claim... Yeah, what were you gonna...
Well, my first comment on that is that does not sound like like that totally.
Oh, for sure.
psyop much, like when the CIA is predicting UFOs, like the only thing I expect if any of their predictions are right are like government anti-gravity tech trying to be, shown off as if it were UFO, like actual genuine, like aliens from another planet.
Yeah. Like I was saying, it's unfortunate because the only people with the access to that technology and or crash anything that's ever happened on this planet are people that if they can come out and leaking this information, you wouldn't trust them necessarily that they're giving you the full truth or the whole truth or that it's not a psyop trying to just sway your opinion on things.
Whistleblowers, like they obviously have ties to these organizations, so it's hard to discern the difference between what do these three-letter agencies want us to believe and what is actually true.
Yeah.
And I think obviously like of the UFO stuff, I'm the most certain, like I have the highest level of confidence that at the very least what is behind this stuff is black budget government research projects.
At least some of it, right?
Well, yeah, like if there was only one thing that could be true out of it, like my level of certainty on the black budget anti-gravity research
I got you.
is pretty high, right? So like
we have that technology, most likely.
We know that research has been going on in the black budget programs, and we know that it was going on out in the open for a while, and then all of those physicists and all of those programs went dark.
Yeah. They just fell off. They no more public viewing.
Right. So if you want to learn more about this, I'd recommend the Jesse Michaels YouTube channel and his interview with Eric Weinstein.
Yeah.
Where he talks about the brain drain that happened in physics and the essentially like physics dead end that happened and that we're still like just coming out of, with string theory being this proposed around
quantum
that
mechanics.
time, and then like everyone putting all this effort into string theory, only for now. Like it was only about 10 years ago when everyone was still talking about string theory, right? As like the main thing. But now like you hear more and more and more of top academics and physicists like just poo-pooing string theory. And,
they say it's a dead end.
As if it was a dead end. It was kind of a waste of time. Not a total waste of time because obviously we still learned a lot by pursuing it.
Yeah, but they just think that we've learned everything that we can learn or need to learn or whatever.
Yeah, it just seems to be a dead end as far as being a unifying theory. Yeah. But anyway.
But the brain drain that you were referencing was this time period where all of the greatest physicists and all the greatest minds kind of stopped being public. None of their work was coming out in papers. None of they were being funded by something.
They went into private industry and stopped publishing in the journals.
Yeah.
And so
there's a dead end. That's all of the at the time, right? It's all of the. Right. At least what he was talking about.
I think at least we've got some anti-gravity stuff going on. Now, the part of the story that connects UFOs to some sort of extraterrestrial presence, some sort of non-human entity presence, I think I lean towards like there is more and more evidence, and especially when you look at people like Diana Pasulka and Jacques Vallée, who do the historical research, it looks like this type of stuff has been happening for a long time. And so to me, that increases the likelihood that it's non-human. And so then if there's that, then it seems that is a likely candidate for inspiring the anti-gravity research.
Yeah. I like the idea, at least I'm more partial to the idea that it's likely that these are maybe biological entities and maybe some kind of like symbiotic thing where they, not like a symbiote, but or like an artificial biology,
some sort of
silicon based life form,
like biological robots or something.
Like what we would send if we had robots fully functioning and higher technology and better communication
systems, some sort of biological
and
entity that essentially served as like a drone for us
to go around and actually search planets, return with information on whether there's life or whatever,
that had like a much more robust ability to, you know, survive
and manipulate its environment enough to do everything necessary and then come back.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what like a lot of people talk about with the Greys.
Right. They think that they could be some kind of like symbiotic life or something where it's like, or it's an organism, but it's like more mechanical in a sense, or it has like some kind of, it's able to function remotely. Like maybe the user, like maybe it's a part of a simulation from another, you know.
But I think like there's
artificial reality.
I think in all likelihood we're probably looking at like a mixture of biological and what we could probably only describe as like spiritual at the moment entities, probably technological entities as well. I'm sure there's like sentient AIs that are going around, you know.
I mean, if we see what we got going on here and the likelihood of this having happened a million years ago on a different planet.
And if you listen to last week's episode where we covered Chandra Vikramasinghe's research with panspermia, like it just doesn't seem so out of left field that there's all of these entities.
Yeah, I mean, not after seeing some of his research. Yeah.
Cool.
So we appreciate the comment. It led us down a little rabbit hole.
Well, also, like if you hear this, and I would like to know what other sources that you know about that are talking about those years and disclosure and.
Yeah, because I just searched real quick and found a sci-fi article, so I'd like to maybe find something else and give me some more.
Right.
But thank you for that.
Totally. I've got an article here. Planet killer asteroid to safely fly by Earth tomorrow. So we're recording this on June 27th, Thursday. So this will be about a week old by the time you guys hear
already
it.
Happened. Yeah.
But it says the asteroid 2011 UL21 will sail by 6.6 million kilometers from our planet. That's the subtitle there. This is by Dr. Alfredo Carpenetti at iflscience.com. I'll leave the link. Tomorrow, Earth will have a relatively close encounter with one of the largest known space rocks in the potentially hazardous asteroid class. It's known as 2011 UL21, and it's classified as a planet killer in size, with a mass estimated to be around 21 billion tons, like a small mountain. It is speeding through the solar system at 25 kilometers per second, or 16 miles per second. If that were to hit us, it would be really bad, but we do not have to worry about that for a long time. It was discovered in 2011, and at the time, it had an estimated 1 in a million chance of hitting the Earth by 2029. Further observations were able to reduce the uncertainty of its orbit pretty quickly. Just a few weeks after the first detection, the chance of it hitting before the end of the decade was dropped to 1 in 71 million. Now the chance of it hitting our planet over the next century is basically nil. Tomorrow's flyby will bring this space rock about 6.6 million kilometers, 4.1 million miles from our planet. That's 17 times the average Earth-Moon distance. So take the distance of the moon, multiply it by 17, it's coming within that distance.
It's pretty far away.
It's pretty far away, but it's, in the grand scheme of things, that's not that far away.
And things have a way of coming back around. In the universe,
if you run that clock forward, like you don't know.
That's why they say we don't have to worry about it for at least the next 100 years or whatever.
And the further out you go in projecting, the less certainty you have, because things can come in and shift stuff around in the solar system.
Could also put us right in the way.
Right.
Next time.
The object's usually described as having a diameter of 1.4 miles, but there are uncertainties on its size, and it could be as small as 1.7 kilometers and as large as 3.9 kilometers. So that's 1 to 2.4 miles. This close approach might help astronomers refine the size. The term potentially hazardous asteroid is a precise formal definition referring to minor planets larger than approximately 459 feet that can come within 4.6 million miles from the Earth. Gianluca Massi, astrophysicist and scientific director of the Virtual Telescope Project, said in a statement, in other words, only the largest asteroids capable of approaching close enough to our planet are flagged as PHAs, which does not mean they're going to hit the Earth, but nonetheless warrant a better monitoring. Using data from the Center for Near-Earth Object Studies of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Massey estimated that the asteroid is going to be in the top 10 largest asteroids to have come within 4.6 million miles of our planet since January 1st, 1900. The closest approach of a bigger object in the last several decades was asteroid Tutatis in 2004, but still over 1 million kilometers or 0.6 million miles away. 2011 UL-21 is going to get closer than tomorrow's flyby in 2089, but still far away enough to not give any worry to scientists. Despite the horizon looking relatively safe, NASA and other space agencies remain concerned about space threats. A recent tabletop exercise has shown significant gaps in our preparedness. This Sunday is Asteroid Day, which aims to raise awareness of this risk and the things we can do to be ready for the event of such a threat.
Well, good.
So that would make Graham Hancock happy.
I know. I was going to say,
he's always complaining that we're not doing enough
to look at these things. Yeah.
So there's a whole article that I haven't read, but I'll check out later. Maybe we'll read this. I'm interested in the tabletop exercises they're doing. They're like,
are they doing like?
They're like doing scenarios.
Yeah.
Like you're seeing nerds like seeing a thing on TV where like nerds will like be put in a scenario like this pandemic or this asteroid or this disaster, and then like they have to sit there and pretend they're the nations of the world and like work together and like simulate what might happen.
It's the Oregon Trail.
Right. So they've been tabletopping this to see like how prepared we might be, which is interesting. I'd like to read more about that.
Okay.
But I got a second article on the same thing because check this out. And this is why this stuff is so important. So 2 large asteroids are set to safely pass by Earth this week. So arriving just before Asteroid Day on June 30th, according to a new report from the European Space Agency. So it's got the same asteroid 2011 UL-21, but it's got a different asteroid 2024 MK, which means, you know what the 2024 means? It was discovered in 2024.
Just discovered it.
Although neither poses any danger to our planet, one of the asteroids was discovered only a week ago, underscoring the importance of enhancing our ability to detect potentially hazardous objects in the vicinity of our planet. So only a week ago, and it's going to have a close flyby.
And it's did this one say it's a planet killer, or is it
this one? So this one measures between 120 and 260 meters. So it's not nearly as big. It was discovered on June 16, 2024. Will pass by Earth on Saturday, June 29th. This sizable near-Earth object will come within 290,000 kilometers of Earth, approximately 75% of the distance to the moon.
Wait, and this is happening Saturday?
This is happening
Saturday. So we're going to be able to see this one.
Well...
Because it's 75% the distance of the moon.
Right, but it's only 120 or 260 meters.
Right, but we still might see it, right?
Probably not with your naked eye. Maybe with a telescope.
Yeah, maybe not.
Despite no risk of impact, The proximity of 2024 MK emphasizes the need for improved detection techniques. There is no risk of 2024 MK impacting Earth. However, an asteroid this size would cause considerable damage if it did. So its discovery just 1 week before it flies past our planet highlights the ongoing need to improve our ability to detect and monitor potentially hazardous near-Earth objects, noted ESA. Amateur astronomers can observe 2024 MK with a small telescope or good binoculars.
Hey.
There you go. In clear, dark skies on June 29 using ESA's NEO toolkit for guidance.
I'm going to have to do that. That's perfect. I'm glad you brought this up because I'm going up to Lake Almanor. I can go with my in-law, my
You'll
father-in-law.
You'll be up there on Saturday with the dark skies.
And he's got really good binoculars. So
look up the ESA's NEO toolkit. Make a note of that so you can remember to check that out.
What was it again? Sorry.
ESA, which is a European Space Agency, they have a NEO, which is Near Earth Object Toolkit, which can guide you on looking for near Earth objects.
Boom. Got it.
So, yeah, there's another close call. I remember on a previous episode, we had another article about that, and I'm going to continue to collect these and point them out as they come to my attention.
And I'm sure if any of you have been listening, you know who Randall Carlson is, and he has presentations and videos and talks where he talks about, like, he just starts listing all of these different asteroids that have come close or are going to, or most of them have come close, and we didn't know about them. Like they just come in, and the importance of understanding that if one of these hits us, like they might not all kill the entire Earth, but talking about like the Tunguska event that happened in 1908 or something like that. Mm-hmm. And
that was
in Russia.
11 Nagasaki's, they said.
Yeah, and it was an airburst, and it never actually hit the ground, but it flattened like, I don't remember how many square miles.
There's some newer research showing that it may have created a small lake in the region too. So the impact from the burst in the air can do that much damage. So, these things are definitely out there, and we should probably put some resources towards this. Yeah, well, not to mention the biblical Sodom that's been found recently, and its connection to a bolide airburst. Yeah, and then there was the crater that they found in Greenland. Mm-hmm. That we don't really have much information on. I think they were saying the dating on that pushes it pretty far back, like at least hundreds of thousands of years. Like the dating doesn't appear to match up with like Younger Dryas stuff, but humans were around. Still yet another.
Humans were on the Earth when that happened.
I don't know how solid the dating is. I think those were just random.
Well, we don't know how far back humans go. We keep pushing it back further and further. True. So.
True.
Either way, these things have happened with humans around and are going to continue to happen. So we have the resources now. If we combine our collective resources, put toward to this a little bit.
All right. So, yeah, we are still getting grazed, people.
It's cool to look at when they don't hit, but
yeah, close calls and Let's redirect funding away from wars and stupid violence and towards things that can save all of humanity. Cool.
WEF.
Yeah.
Come on.
All right. So where are we at here? We only got a few minutes to go. Do you got another anything else you want to talk about? Or should we take let's make this a shorter segment so we can have
just start fresh with the next
to go straight into Cosmic Summit stuff when we come back.
Sounds good. All right. We'll be back in a few, won't be that long for you.
Just a couple minutes for you. We'll be back.
Here we are. All right.
yeah, which talks have you watched so far?
So I've watched the Brothers of the Serpent. They're Kyle and Russ Allen. And then I watched, I don't know, maybe 3/4 of Adam Young's stuff on the Vases. I did watch Chandra Vikram's song, which we sang, which we went over last week. And then I didn't get into any Randall. At least I skipped around a bit just to see where he was going with the type of stuff he was talking about. But yeah, I didn't watch much of him. Malcolm Bendall, which we already talked about.
Yeah.
Who all have you gone through all of them yet?
Turns out they do have all the classroom days recorded too.
Yeah, I saw that.
Weren't
I just
sure
didn't
about
click.
that.
Yeah, I did see that. I just haven't clicked on them yet.
So you got a full day of Randall, a full day of Malcolm Bendall, and there was a third classroom. I forget which one that was.
It was Scott Walter, Timothy Hogan, and Haley Ramsey.
Yeah.
Randall Carlson and team Malcolm Bendall. Yeah.
I watched.
That's that's 8 hours of Randall.
Yeah.
Which.
Well, and team. I don't know who he's got with him. But
that's true. Yeah, he'll probably bring in some other people.
I watched Chris Cottrell, Randy Daniel. I watched the panel discussion.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
With Robert Schock?
It was like all.
It was just all
of them having a panel. And then I watched the Praveen Mohan, and I watched the Brothers of Serpent's version on their podcast, and then I skipped forward and watched their Q&A section from the live speech.
Yeah, I watched a little bit of their Q&A just at the end, right?
Yeah.
Of their talk.
Praveen Mohan was pretty interesting. He's the one I just watched. I don't know how it ties into the ancient stuff, but it does. Like his whole theme is like ancient Indian technology.
Yeah.
He covers like all the different like Buddhist temples and stuff out there.
Oh, okay.
His talk was, well, that's kind of his just specialty in general, is like ancient technology and from the Vedas and from the Indian time. And he's got his whole YouTube channel around that. But the talk was specifically focusing in on the idea of like advanced medical technology, that they were capable of like surgeries.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What level of surgeries?
Well, let's go into it. So, yeah, he shows this skull, this 4,300-year-old skull found in Harappa, and multiple examples of these skulls with like what appear to be surgical drill holes into the skulls.
Yeah.
And by looking at them, you can find that they the person who had the hole drilled like continued living, because you can tell that the bone kept growing after it was cut.
Interesting.
So these are people who like went on to live after having a hole drilled in their skull, which sure seems like surgery.
Seems like a lobotomy.
Yeah, I mean, there's other reasons, medical reasons why you would do that. I know in modern science it sometimes happens to like relieve pressure inside the skull.
Right.
If someone's got like some sort of inflammation going on inside the brain.
Looks like bullet holes.
Yeah, you need to have somewhere for that pressure to be let off to avoid like catastrophic brain damage when you get that type of thing happening.
Injury, yeah.
Yeah. He shows some examples of civilizations with like north, like cardinal direction aligned streets, just to show how
planned out
they
streets
were.
And stuff.
Right.
Cut into the bedrock, it looks like, and flattened.
Well, he also said that these streets are like 35 foot wide roads, which why? Unless you have some sort of vehicles passing on them.
Horse and buggy.
Well, and he suggests that they do have vehicles passing on them too, because the buildings have rounded corners, so that at the street intersections, you know, if someone's making a curve, you're less likely to clip that corner of the building if it's rounded.
Yep. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. And then
there you go. It's like a sculpture.
This
looks like they're having some kind of pliers to their tongue.
Yeah, so it kind of looks like
holding their
dentistry
head. Or torture, but
yeah, and that's what he said too. He's like, this could be dentistry, but it could be torture.
Right. My only thing is just the way they're holding the hair right there.
Right.
And the positioning.
Well, they got the foot on the chest to like get leverage.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I didn't even notice that.
Yeah. So he asked that question, like
dentistry or torture. Yeah.
But there's actually lots of examples of teeth with holes drilled, like cavities drilled out of them and stuff.
Wow.
And so it does seem to suggest dentistry was happening.
Yeah, at least some attempts at dentistry.
And he says that evidence goes to like 7 to 9,000 years ago.
Oh, wow. Damn.
And this is like historians or like archaeologists, like sort of theory on how they may have done it, like using like a bow drill. Have you guys ever seen like a bow drill?
Yeah.
You, like take a stick with a rope. That's your bow. You wrap some sort of rod in there, and then you can move the bow back and forth to make the rod spin quickly.
Yeah, you pull the string and it makes it spin back and forth.
Yeah, it's like a manual way of doing drilling.
That's the way you start a fire.
That's the way you start a fire, yeah. But they were showing how you could do that for dentistry. But the problem is, like, if you notice this picture, he's only able to drill into that tooth because the rest of the skull is not there.
Yeah. Imagine doing that with somebody's mouth just open. Like,
right.
I mean, you'd have to have multiple people on this.
It seems like you would need a little bit more advanced tooling than just a bow drill to be able to get in someone's mouth. Either that or it's a pretty advanced bow drill with like miniaturized pieces.
Oh yeah, or the one that they have can do like a 90-degree turn.
Right. So here's some examples of teeth that have had holes drilled in them.
What the fuck? From the side makes sense.
Yeah.
Doing it from the front.
Right.
Instead of from the top.
Right. So then he talks about how like Indian history, he talks about like the two different aspects that like we have history and we have prehistory, right? And what defines history is writing, right? Anything before writing is considered prehistory. And so he's trying to investigate that period too, which the Indian civilization goes way back into prehistory.
Right.
And so he does that through looking at statues and the temples and stuff that have survived, and looking at trying to pull the meaning out of the imagery in there.
Yeah, find the writing in the wall. What's that comparison? Or is it just the format of it?
He's saying, what he's saying here is he's saying that what we read about in modern books about ancient India is totally different than what you read if you actually read the ancient texts like the Vedas and whatnot.
Yeah.
So they talk about Vimanas and other flying machines.
UFOs, dragons.
Yeah. Anyway, so he also in one of the books he mentioned which one it is. I don't have that right here. It might be this. I can't pronounce that. I can barely read it. Anyway, but he said they had 8 different branches of medicine, like described, or of medicine described in these ancient texts, which he identifies with internal medicine, fertility, pediatrics, ENT. I don't know what that is. gerontology, toxicology, surgery, and psychiatry.
Interesting.
He shows this really cool. This is actually a video, so I'll be linking a ton of these pictures. Not all of them can be on the chapter art, so make sure you go into the show notes and click the link to the website for this episode, because I'll have all the photos that I'm talking about uploaded there. But in this one, he's showing that this piece right here that he's holding on to is actually a moving piece.
Oh wow!
They
so
can
it can
rotate
spin it around.
That. Yeah, they can. So he's like, essentially using that to suggest that maybe they were building like complicated machines.
Interesting. Like they're not just structural. They actually have moving parts which can be hooked up in certain ways to be used for leverage. So
what we're looking at here, for those who are just listening, is there's a stone column in one of these temples, and there's a cylinder that looks like it looks like it's integrated into the column, but it's actually a separate piece, and him and the guy next to him, you can just spin it around the column.
It doesn't fall out?
It doesn't seem to have any function, but maybe it could be used as like a pulley for like leverage for like lifting things.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking you wrap something around each of those in a pattern, and then you have leverage to pull things down a hallway or something, right? Mm-hmm. But it's interesting, even if they just spin for, the sake of it, it's fascinating.
And then he starts showing off some of these statues. So what's really interesting about these statues is they have a hole drilled in them right below the rib cage, off to, if you're looking at the statue, it would be on your left, but it would be the statue's right, which is pretty much where doctors would do incisions today in order to like drain people's liver who have like alcohol, like fatty liver disease and like different alcoholism causing the liver to like overfill with bile and whatnot.
Right.
Which sounds like a kind of a stretch, like, oh, why would that be the case, right?
Could have been another purpose, yeah.
Could have been another purpose. Like maybe someone just drilled a hole in that statue to mount a candle to it. I don't know.
Is it in all of them?
Well, it's in both of these statues.
Is there only two of them?
And then, okay, that's still not saying much. But then you look at, if you notice these figures around the person's feet.
Yeah, what are those?
So if we zoom in, what we can see is that these figures are drinking alcohol. So it's almost as though this is like a statue showing what happens if you consume too much alcohol. Like maybe it was an educational tool for like future doctors saying like, these demons of alcohol, right? Like if you give in to them,
they do look like
you're going to end up needing a procedure like this. And then they show on the statue where the procedure is done, where the hole is made in order to go in and drain the liver.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely plausible for sure.
I mean, it seems super out there until you combine that particular positioning lined up with the liver with these goblin little creatures holding on to the statue's legs that are holding wine cups and like licking out of the cup and stuff.
It's interesting.
It sure seems like some sort of
another one, and it's right next to
lesson. It. Yeah.
And the other one probably has something similar.
Yeah, he's like licking.
No, I mean the full statue next to it.
Oh, the full statue next to it. He doesn't have things on his feet.
But it looks like in his hand. Like it looks like there's something in his hand.
There might be something more. I don't have the zoom ins of those.
Yeah. I would love to see a little bit closer on those, just to see if maybe...
Yeah, maybe they're showing a distinction between a couple different cases or something.
Or a different illness, or the physician in themselves.
Right, so maybe this one on the left is the guy who needs this procedure because he drank too much alcohol, whereas the one on the right needs it for a totally different reason.
Right. Interesting. Cool.
Yeah. He shows, I don't know where he was going with these, but it's pretty interesting anyway. He shows these statues, and he calls it Maya, which is like almost like something hidden or encoded, is what he says it means. But what we're looking at here is a statue of a horse, right? There's another one of a statue of an elephant, but this one, he's got it colored, and inside of it is actually a bunch of these what look like to me like lizards or birds. Those look like birds to me.
Those look like birds. Some of them look like lizards because of the positioning they're in.
Yeah, but
like if you see
it's a bunch of lizards or birds that are making up like a weird texture that overall makes up the shape of an elephant.
An elephant, and the one above is a
horse. The horse, right? I think he did that in order to show. I think he's showing this in order to show like how they may encode some of their knowledge, like in like layers of meaning that you have to like sort of work for.
Yeah, like and this is prehistory, right? That they're finding this stuff.
He threw out a bunch of different dates for the different temples, and I didn't get all the notes for what all the photos and what the dates of the temples, but this is another
prehistory,
example.
like they a lot of times in prehistoric stuff they use symbols as words. So,
right.
So
this is another example he gives of like Maya, and so he asks you like, what are we looking at here? And it looks like a statue showing two women, maybe in some sort of intimate embrace.
Yeah, or in some sort of trance, like dance or something.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like one of them's twerking into the other one's face.
Yeah,
that the other one's like hugging her from behind.
And it, like the way it looks like their arms are the circle around.
So then he's like, all right, well, let's look at this in a little more detail, right? And so what are these? Where's my...
He's zooming in on the image now.
Yeah, I'm trying to zoom in, but now I can't scroll properly. There we go. All right, so there's these parts that look terrible zoomed in. But this is actually inside this little circular part. This is a rabbit.
The bottom left of the image.
And then if you zoom over to the right side, we got another rabbit hidden in there. And then there's another one. That one's easier to see.
Fertility.
And another one. But what's interesting is if you take a closer, or maybe blur your eyes a little bit and have another look at this image of the two women, it also appears to make a rabbit. Which is interesting. Yeah. I don't know what it means, and he didn't really go into detail. I think he was really just trying to impress upon you like the types of like symbolism and whatnot that can be shown in their artwork. They've got artwork of human fetuses inside of a womb with an umbilical cord in a proper fetal position, which is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, they just cut open, which is horrifying to think about. But
yeah, I'm sure it happened at least a few times that like a pregnant woman may have passed while pregnant, right? And then for the sake of science, whoever is the medical practitioners
maybe to save the baby,
time. Right. So then he talks about this medical text from around 1,000 years BCE. And he talks about how it describes psychotherapy. It describes 60 different types of treatment of wounds, 300 different types of surgical procedures, all categorized into 8 categories. It describes different types of tools, including forceps, scalpels, speculum, lancets, probes, suturing, needles. and overall 120 different surgical instruments. Like even within forceps, like they described like 8 to 10 different types of forceps that they would use for different reasons, procedures, different reasons. There's artwork of people performing surgeries. There's artwork of students performing surgeries on vegetables.
Practicing, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
There's artwork here that I thought was a little bit of a stretch until he like finished laying out his points. But he's talking about how in modern day, like one of the big breakthroughs in women's health was the mammogram. And he shows here the statue of a woman who's holding some sort of like roughly triangular shaped object up to her breast. She's holding her finger up to her like a thinking sort of posture, and she's got a tear coming down her eye.
Yeah. Wow.
So he's like, obviously this isn't explicit proof, but like it kind of
it's pretty interesting.
Seems to be suggestive.
Definitely worth more evidence or looking for more stuff on it.
They had the ability to perform C-sections, and you see C-section scars on multiple statues of women. The horizontal scar below the belly button. It's multiple times. The top one looks more like somebody came in and scratched it. But that one right there looks, Mm-hmm. And so he says that he talks about how Krishna, his mother, or he in the legend of Krishna, he is not born of a natural birth, and he is delivered through a C-section.
Yeah.
And this is actually a statue of his mom.
Oh, wow.
And she's got the C-section scars there below her belly button.
Wow.
And yeah, that was basically his talk. He ran out of time, so I don't know if he was gonna like tie it all in together, but he ran out of time. But I tell you what it has done is made me want to subscribe to his YouTube channel because it's super interesting.
What was his name again?
Praveen Mohan.
Yeah, that's really cool. Which day was he on? I didn't see him at all.
He was on day 2 on the main stage. That's him.
Oh, okay.
So it's YouTube at Real Praveen Mohan. So you PraveenMohan. So check him out. I'm giving him a subscribe right now.
Same. So yeah, the story of Krishna is an interesting one.
Dang it. I'm giving him double subscribe. I gave him on the duality check-in on mine.
Nice. He just got 3 new subscribers.
So yeah, what in general his talk is like the idea of advanced tech in ancient India. And so I'm not super aware of the entire ancient Indian history and their timeline and how far back they go.
And what time frame this is in their
yeah, so a lot of the stuff he showed was from like maybe 1,000 years ago. Some of it's from BC times. Not a lot of what he showed is claimed to have been from like much more before, say, a couple thousand years BC. But the thing is, what I do know about the Indian culture is that the Vedas were only written down much later. There was a very long, like multi-thousand year tradition of the Vedas being passed down through memorization from person to person. Wow. It was all verbal.
So it was never written down until
like... The stories are many thousands of years later that it was passed down orally until then. So I don't know what evidence, or if there's evidence that they go back to like Younger Dryas times or anything, and which is obviously like the peak of my interest. But regardless of whether or not they go back that far, they clearly have stories and evidence of much more advanced technology
and information
than we would credit
science
people of, you know. No one expected people back in 1000 BC to be performing C-sections and surgeries and cranial surgeries and, you know, draining people's livers of bile, like
doing dentistry.
Like, this is all
psychotherapy,
pretty advanced stuff that, to be honest, it would most likely end in people's death.
Yeah, and probably
unless you have antibiotics and like some sort of anesthesia, whether it's localized or whatever.
Yeah.
And so that to me, that also would indicate, like, if you have medicine that's this advanced, like surgeries that are that advanced, you gotta have some way to like deal with people's pain. You definitely have to have a way to deal with infection, or else you're gonna be more times than not doing more harm than good by opening someone up.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I'm wondering, I know we're eventually going to be covering Brian Murescu's stuff on a lot of these ancient, herbs and stuff that were used, drugs and alcohol that were used in ancient times. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it covers their culture specifically, but it might be broader.
No, Brian Murescu's mostly focuses around the Mediterranean and around like early Christianity, early Greeks, or like the Greek culture that shifted into Christianity, and like early Greek religion and their practices.
But it's not to say that these things happened in a vacuum and isolated, like these. Having this type of knowledge could have been. And there's also a lot of stories and evidence of there being some sort of like nomadic culture that would go from place to place and spread information. Like a lot of the stories of the, you know, restarting of civilization, right? Mm-hmm. Happened. And the reason a lot of these different places all over the world kind of peaked at different times is because it was like a moving around, or maybe just one person or something, you know, that had a lot of knowledge.
So I see a few options here. Like maybe some of these temples and the oral traditions of the Vedas go way further back, right?
Than you would think, yeah.
Or maybe what this is actually telling us is that, no, it doesn't go that far back. Maybe it goes back a few thousand BC. Mm-hmm. It doesn't go all the way back to the Younger Dryas, at least in India. But what it shows you is that India was able to rise to this level, and that got lost somehow.
Yeah, that's true.
And so it, regardless of whether or not it shows is, you know, Younger Dryas or pre-Ice Age civilization evidence, it is evidence of lost technology and lost civilizations, even within, you know, nearer history and prehistory, which, you know, suggests it gives us examples that this is a thing that can happen. And it can even happen in a place, in a civilization we know about to this day, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And like the evidence he pointed out, like none of it was like so obscure that no one could have noticed this stuff. And I'm sure he's not the first person who has, but like no one ever, like at least here in the West, like I've never learned about ancient India and their ability to perform advanced surgeries. Like,
right. That's not something you generally learn in your history classes.
Right. So I found it super fascinating. So
at least our history classes.
Praveen Mohan, give him a check. I will be following his work.
Hell yeah. Well, we're getting close to a break here. Do you want to start something else, or you got something quick or anything like that?
No. Let's
just take a break.
Yeah, then we'll have more time again. We're so close.
If I called your name, what would you do?
I'd say, what?
Yes.
You called? see you
We'll be
guys
right
in a sec. Welcome back.
We are back. If I called your name, what would you say? What would you do? Who would you be? I really like that song.
Thanks. I gotta upload the album on the website. Give people a free download.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. So we're back, ready to talk some more about the Cosmic Summit.
Yeah.
Shall we talk about the Brothers of the Serpent's talk?
Yeah, let's do that first. Ooh, I just yanked the cord. Hold on. Okay.
Are you back? Can you hear?
I can hear.
Are your ears working?
Yep.
Cool. So,
Brothers of the Serpent.
yeah.
Yeah, so their talk was Gobekli Tepe.
It was
Specifically this time.
Gobekli Tepe, and honestly, a little bit bigger than that is kind of like the sites in Turkey,
Yes.
with an emphasis on Gobekli Tepe,
Yes.
right? Because they just got back from a trip to Turkey.
Yeah.
Was that earlier this year? I think.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
It was only a few months ago,
Yeah.
I think.
So yeah, they got to see this stuff firsthand, which is
And they got a lot of pictures, and they just put together a presentation based on a lot of the stuff that they were inquiring about when they went there, because they went there wanting to learn from the site.
right. And so we'll cover some of their points here, but this is not a replacement for any of these people's talks. But especially in this case, you can already see the talk for free on their Brothers of the Serpent YouTube channel.
Yep.
They're, as of this moment of this recording, the latest video on there is their presentation of this.
Yeah, they put it out there for their subscribers, so if you're going to go watch it, just hit the subscribe button for them too.
Yeah, totally.
And
So
if you
yeah,
listen to this, hit the subscribe button right now.
right
On us.
on
right
us. Yeah, give us a like too. Share it on your social media.
now. Sorry, I didn't mean to. But yeah, so what you got? What do you got?
I took some screenshots and stuff as they went, and just took some random notes. But they essentially start off just like setting the stage of what is Gobekli Tepe.
Yeah.
And it's this.
What do we know about it?
It's what archaeologists are calling a temple, but we don't exactly know that. temple is such a weird, like, catch-all word. Like, you just apply it to something, and what do you automatically think it is? You think it's a place people go to, like, worship, like, archaic gods that they were into at the time or whatever, right?
The problem that it
makes you think of it like a church.
Yes, like it's some religious thing, but in reality, what they're saying is that there's no evidence of humans living there.
Yeah, so specifically Gobekli Tepe, they don't have, like, it's got quote unquote temple structures, but it doesn't have like dwellings.
Right, that's right. Yeah, they do find evidence that people had lived there, but that there wasn't like permanent dwellings, permanent places for people to sleep and live, and it was an open space.
The stone structure appears to be the quote unquote temple, not like individual dwellings as you would imagine.
But they do talk about how it was refurbished over time too, so that people inhabited it. And try to renovate it in a sense, like keep the pillars up.
They build up to that, so that's kind of where they're going with the talk. But like in setting the stage for Gobekli Tepe, at the time it was discovered, it was pretty much instantly the world's oldest temple. It was by far the oldest megalithic site that had ever been discovered, and not just megalithic site, architectural site. This was the world's first architecture that was hard dated back to 11,600 years ago, right around, give or take. And it became a World Heritage Site. But now, in the years since, Karahan Tepe was discovered, which we know is at least 500 or 600 years older than Gobekli Tepe.
Yeah, which puts you back probably closer to 12,000 or over.
Right, but then further. On top of that, with ground penetrating radar, they've been able to find another like 20 to 30, like couple dozen more of these Tepe-ish sites.
Yeah.
The vast majority of which have yet to even be excavated almost whatsoever.
Right.
So the two that have been excavated the most are Karahan Tepe and Gobekli Tepe.
Yeah, that's where all the information on it is coming from right now.
Right. So he says there's 4 enclosures that have been at least partially excavated. That they're between 65 and 100 feet in diameter, the enclosures. They've got these T-shaped pillars which are mounted into the bedrock. The bedrock of the temple was flattened with pedestals left on them and sockets for the T-pillars to join into.
Yeah, it's socketed down into the bedrock. That's crazy to think about. Like, and they lowered the bedrock to allow for these pedestals
to get a flat plane.
But then they dug down so they could have it in the ground, which is way more advanced than need be at the time. Like,
so the megaliths themselves are sitting on bedrock, and the bedrock itself was flattened and carved into shape to accept the pillars. So like, this is pretty high level stuff if you can flatten bedrock and make it a level plane.
Yeah, that just makes me think of freaking like machinery doing that, you know?
Yeah. The oldest date that has come out of Gobekli Tepe is 9,500 BCE or 11,500 years ago.
Yeah.
And typically how this stuff is dated is because there's what's called midden piles there.
Yeah. And which if you don't know, if you're just
they spend some time talking about midden.
If you don't know about the site though, either they're like it was excavated because which now they believe it was purposefully buried. Mm-hmm. Like these hills were covered and they thought it was just hilltops until they found pillars sticking out of the ground, and then they started excavating and they found out that they were filled in with this midden.
I believe it was the farmer who owned the land or something who found it.
Yeah, and then they came to do the excavation and they found that it's buried in all of this midden material.
Right. So Gobekli Tepe is at the top of a hill, okay? Mm-hmm. And the hill itself it has a very thin coating of soil, and in some places none, because you can see where the bedrock juts out. Okay, that's kind of like the nature of the place, and I'll leave some Google Earth photos. But the hill itself is very little soil on top of bedrock. The bedrock's exposed in many places, but then when you get up to the top of the hill where the actual site is, then there was like a hill on top of the hill, and that what was inside of that all of these years until it was discovered was this Gobekli Tepe. But what that hill was composed of, the hill on top of the hill, was a bunch of midden, which is essentially garbage.
Yeah, it's just all of the things that you would accumulate as a people living in the area.
Right.
All of the animal
bones and trash and different human waste, potsherds. There's a lot of they've found a lot of like spear points and arrowheads in there.
It's a lot of lithics and
other debris,
everything.
They found
obvious signs of humans. Like that's just, but they covered the entire site.
Yeah, they also found a bunch of milling stones.
Oh yeah,
or like grinding stones for grinding wheat and stuff down. So the entire site is a hill on top of a hill. The hill on top of the hill is what's called a tell. They said that's like the lingo for it. So the tell is an artificial hill, which is composed of midden. And they showed some photos that were pretty interesting, which were like different examples of like entire sites that cities have been built upon, where like unbeknownst to the people who built the city on that hill, like that hill that they're on is just a midden pile. It's a tell.
Which is insane.
And so you get these generations of people like building on top of like the previous generations. Like
which you see down in South America as well. Back then they were, when one generation died off, they would build on top of that literally.
Right.
And then they would live up there. And then when they would, and then that was their burial place. And then the next generation. Yeah.
And that even happened in places like Greece. I got a coworker who just went to did a cruise in Greece for a honeymoon.
Oh, cool.
And I forget which building. I think he said it was the Temple of Dionysus that they found. And there was a church on top of it. And when they discovered the temple below, they deconstructed and moved and reconstructed the church. Then excavated down to the Temple of Dionysus. So like this stuff happens all the time.
Yeah.
Where things get covered up.
Yeah. It's just crazy that, given enough time. Like that was the fridge.
Oh. I was like, someone knocking?
I didn't.
Do you want to go check? I think we're good.
Yeah. Lost my train of thought now.
But other interesting things about, we were talking about the idea of things being built on top of each other. You were about to go off on something about that after we talked about the Temple of Dionysus.
Oh yes, and just the fact that over a certain amount of time, you like our trash and our just rubble turns into a whole hill, like given enough time.
Right.
But also artificially can be brought in and, there's evidence though that there's like many generations of people that live there, right?
Yes.
So that means that over a long period of time, if they live in there, but they also find that there was an abundance of food. And there was an abundance of agriculture, in a sense, like wild agriculture, like happening there, where they were just able to pick and live and prosper, and they were feasting there. There were like evidence of feasts and
you're talking about
communal.
Gobekli
Tepe. So that's like the people there living, which was at the latest 11,500 years ago.
The quote unquote earliest.
Yeah. But that's when the pile starts, right? Like you would
Yeah,
imagine.
that's the oldest dated
midden material.
Yeah, organic material.
So that means that people were there, and over the generations, they were feasting, like work feasts or like some kind of communal feasts happening there. Mm-hmm. And they would leave all this trash, and then over time, it just filled in.
There's some really interesting facts about the place too, which is that it's built really far away from any water sources. It's also not in a valley; it's a hilltop, so it's not fertile land. There's no soil layer. In fact, the only thing you can grow on the hill is the midden pile because it's basically compostable material that, plants can draw nutrition from.
And whereas the rest of
the and the orchards are sitting on the midden pile.
Yeah, which they think there's more down there, right?
Right. Here's a photo of like the hillside driving up to Gobekli Tepe, and you see these other hillsides. It's mostly bedrock point with like little tiny bits of grass, but you couldn't grow your orchard over there because there's not enough soil.
Bedrock right there.
So the orchard sitting on the site itself. So it's a strange site,
which we talked about
for building because of the fact that it's not close to any food or water. So.
Yeah, which I think lends to their idea that it was a temple of sorts, where it was somewhere that their builders, maybe not the people who created the midden piles who covered it up with their trash, but the people who built the site.
It was there for a
purpose, and they would travel there to perform whatever, do whatever. That was a meeting place.
Right. Maybe it was a trading exchange or who knows.
Yeah. Or just a marker, some sort of marker on the landscape.
Yeah. The midden pile is as deep as 50 feet in some areas. And the midden pile, the tell is I think he said the site is about 20 acres.
Wow. That's a lot of midden.
Yeah. The monoliths are at the very bottom layer of the tell. So all of that midden pile all came after the original construction.
Yeah.
Then they spend some time going over the different types of spear and arrowhead points. And they talk about how scientists have identified this stuff as PP or pre-pottery Neolithic, PPNA. Yeah, so the PPN people are the pre-pottery Neolithic people.
Yeah.
Who had, and there's a A and there's a B. And so the building, like the 11,500 years ago, falls into PPNA, which comes before the B.
Right. So they're dating it based on that. I got it.
Right. And so the lithics that they find, the points, they do match PPNA technology, which is like rough flint points. Not as beautiful as like some of the Clovis points, if you've seen them. Not quite as sophisticated. But apparently they had a hard time making spear points, but they could make these gorgeous freaking T-shaped pillars out of stone with 3D relief carving. I don't understand.
Yeah. I mean, again, to just keep in the mind that they can't date the stone.
Right.
So we don't know how long that's been there.
Right.
All we know is how long people have been leaving trash there.
Right. They know how long people have been leaving trash, and they also, because they have pretty well established these toolkits of the PPNA people, so you can also identify time based on the toolkits found. So the certain types of toolkits would suggest that it is the PPNA people, which goes to a certain point in time. So that's like sort of a rough dating, and then you add the organic dating onto that.
Yeah. But that's still just
how
long it's been occupied.
It still only proves that there were people in that time period with that technology who were there after it was built. It does not actually directly prove that those stones were set in place by those people in that time period.
Right, because you think about the location of it, right? You think about how far away it is from water. There's no living quarters built in there. Sure, nearby at Karahan Tepe there are places where they believe people were living, but you still have to travel to this to get there. So it just makes you think that for a long period of time, and I'm not sure how long, whether it be 100 years or 1,000 years or whatever, they might have been traveling there and keeping it clean when it's pristine, first built. You cleared the land, did all the things you did. You would think they would travel there and keep it clean. It was some sort of monument to them. And you would assume they wouldn't just bring in all of their trash. So just because you're finding these things at 11,500 years is the oldest dating, doesn't mean that could have been 500 years before that,
right?
Or 1,000 years before that they've been using the site without leaving anything behind to start dating it.
Right. So essentially, you're saying the site could be twice as old as far as when it was constructed, and if the first people who came and dropped trash there were 11,500 years ago, because if it was 20,000 years ago, that puts it before the Younger Dryas, right? And so then you can assume maybe the Younger Dryas wipes it clean of whatever material would have been there. And then these PPNA people come and find it, discover it, and set up shop there.
Yeah, because we know there was 2 waves to that Younger Dryas event.
Right. There was the onset of the Younger Dryas 12,800 years ago, and then there was the dramatic end of the Younger Dryas at 11,006.
Right. So imagine the time right when the onset happened, where things changed drastically and the people were wiped out, and then 1,000 years later at the end of the Younger Dryas, do people finally rediscover this?
They also found over 7,000 grinding tools there, and there were some of the scientists are a little bit confused because it seems like too many. So maybe it really was generations of people taking it up as a home base after it was discovered,
which
explains the giant midden piles.
Yeah, because of the evidence of how well fed and stuff, this could be a fertile time right after the end of the Younger Dryas, where the land starts bouncing back. Animals come back and all these things come back and they're starting to habitate, and they're sitting in a golden age, where they have all the food they need, they have all the time, and they're just sitting around, and they don't have much, so they're just hanging around, but they're moving around with the animals, and they come back to this as a seasonal thing.
Then they show this slide, which I freaking love. And this is showing all the different sites found in the greater Turkey area. Also, all the way from Jericho and Israel and all the Gobekli Tepe, all of these. Do they have? Yeah, they got Abu Huraira in there.
Yeah.
All across this area, we find dozens of these tepes. We find multiple examples of these underground cities. And it just seems to be a wealth of prehistoric sites.
And again, we talked about on one of our previous episodes, now they're shutting these things down and we are no longer going to be getting any new...
I mean, it's not completely shut down. It's just they're not going to
do any more excavations.
Not the major excavation anyway.
Yeah. They'll probably chip away at it, but they're not doing any big, heavy earth moving.
Which is really frustrating.
Especially on one of them. There's a bunch of them. Pick one that's not going to interrupt anybody's day.
Yeah.
And you go and excavate it completely and just find out what the heck's going on.
Yeah.
Find out as much evidence as you possibly can.
And one of the things that's really interesting about Gobekli Tepe is that for a long time before Gobekli Tepe was discovered, was that archaeologists had known about these PPN cultures for a long time. And there was a view of them that they're hunter-gatherers and they had these rough tool sets, right? they were never considered to have had the ability of creating megalithic sites.
Right.
And it wasn't until the discovery of Gobekli Tepe and the dating of those organics that, place them in the PPNA period that they had to be like, well, apparently they could.
Right. Which is so lazy. It's so lazy because they just want to lump it in with their theory. It's obvious.
It's just less of a dramatic rewriting of prehistory to say, oh, these hunter-gatherers could also build megalithic works and level bedrock.
Right.
Versus
trying to admit that there was a culture before
right.
that had the technology and the time to do these
as
things.
Dramatic as it actually was to give credit to hunter-gatherers for building megaliths, and that is a dramatic thing because they had a well understood explanation of these PPN people, and it wasn't until the Gobekli Tepe that they were like, well, I guess we're forced into considering this. Right. And that was never part of the picture. And which goes to show that it doesn't necessarily fit well into the historical account or prehistorical account that archaeologists are putting together.
Yeah, as is. It needs updating and it needs the full, full on analyzing of the new evidence.
Right. And then they spend some time comparing Gobekli Tepe to another one of these ancient sites, which is Jericho. And they show a bunch of photos of Jericho, and they show that they're stone walls, they're stone towers. There's a stone tower that's like 20-something feet tall. These are still impressive works, but these are all stones you can pick up by hand. Right. There's no megaliths here.
Right.
And you notice the types of they look like cobblestone walls and whatnot.
Yeah. They're just
which, if you look at pictures of Gobekli Tepe, there are also a bunch of what look like cobblestone walls between all the pillars. And then they start going over, they go over his proposed construction, and the basics is of what you would have to do to make Gobekli Tepe happen. You would have to be able to go to this hilltop, clear off the topsoil, get down to the bedrock, level the bedrock. And they point out that along the edge of the bedrock there, they leave these built-in benches.
Yeah.
But they also leave platforms that will then have slots drilled into them. And then they're going to have to go whatever distance to where their quarry sites are. Mm-hmm. And they're going to have to quarry these T-pillars and travel with them up to the top of this hill of Gobekli Tepe. And then they're going to have to lift these multi-ton pillars
into place
in these sockets. But the thing is even in Egypt, they proposed that the way these big stones were uprighted was by the use of digging out sand and causing the weight to shift to have it move up through the forces of leverage and gravity. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But when you're on bedrock, you don't have that option. There's no sand there. So they at least had to have some sort of tooling or ability and understanding of how to manipulate these giant stones and have the leverage to turn them upright.
Yeah. Which, if you're attributing to what they still call hunter-gatherers and the, Clovis culture and...
Yeah, at a certain point, if you're saying it was hunter-gatherers that did that, then
what kind of you're attributing
you're essentially
so
blowing up the definition of a hunter-gatherer in my mind.
Completely. And of course, you still have to hunt and gather to survive, but there's some other level of information and technology and understanding that these people had.
And I think the counter argument there is oh, well, you don't understand. It was actually the hunter-gatherers who had the most free time. Life was easy for them. But if you look at this place in this landscape, this is a barren landscape. There's no water nearby. Right. If you're going to live here, there's people constantly doing water runs, bringing water to the site. There's people having to go out and travel to hunt.
The organized labor it would take.
Right. This is also the origin of agriculture, I believe, around this time. Yeah. So like you still can't really grow here because there's no soil. So you need to move far enough. Like, so none of the things you need for like living are right there on that site. Right. So you must have the ability to travel and import things, which means like divisions of labor and specialties and like skill sets that like are highly refined, way more than I think can be attributed to PPN people.
Yeah, no, I agree.
People working with like basic
tools and flint points and
early generation of
like
these flint points. Like
these are
not that these flint points don't take a ton of like arts and crafts skill and like
just the
practice,
effectiveness,
but like it's a primitive tool of someone who doesn't have full command of like making whatever they want, obviously, right? Mm-hmm. So but yeah, so then they also show that
back to like the walls that are inside the cobblestone walls that are inside Gobekli Tepe.
Those cobblestone walls, many of them are built out of like rocks that you could just pick up and build a wall out of. But then you see embedded in those stone walls are chunks of what used to be T-pillars.
Yeah.
And so what that tells you is clearly the T-pillar
happened first.
Yeah. And when the people who built the walls came, there was broken and toppled T-pillars already on the ground.
Yeah, and they picked the smaller ones, looks like. Not the when the whole top part falls off, they didn't use that. They used the small ones that break off. Mm-hmm. And they put it in these cobblestone walls, and you get this giant, like, we'll probably post this one where it's highlighted.
If you notice in the cobblestone, like what he points out is that the cobblestones they're choosing, like the stone they're building the wall out of, these are not hewn stones. These are not cut stones. These are found stones that are stacked with skill, but stacked. Mm-hmm. Whereas the T-pillar stones, these are carved, these are cut, these are quarried.
Yeah.
And
they're finished.
Clearly the people who built the walls came later and had less skill than the people who built the T-pillars.
Or just didn't care to do it, right? So that's possible. But even still...
Or they didn't exert the effort.
They didn't exert any of the effort to do it. So it looks like, and they show other examples
so this is where
the walls kind of connect to the T-pillars.
Right.
And he talks about these vertical...
like this instance he shows... Yeah. This is an instance of the wall going around the T-pillar and actually blocking up some of the art.
Which you wouldn't do if this happened at the same time.
If this was single-phase construction, you're right. That would not have
and it's
happened.
A 360-degree, or all the way around these pillars, there's artwork. And there's depictions. Right. So on another slide, they talk about these, where the walls kind of come up to the pillars. You can see where they built the wall up to about... to give and stopped with enough room to be able to stand these things back up had they fallen, and they tried to get them to the exact same height of other unbroken pillars. It looks like maybe to put some sort of roof on top. Maybe they had some sort of like animal pelt roof that they could string across, and they wanted it to be flat.
I'm sure they could make cording and stuff. They could attach cording, make like a mesh to then like lay some sort of like roofing on.
Yeah. And so the evidence that they came later was obviously these vertical, fission, like vertical discontinuities is the way he describes it, where they stopped building the wall and then they stood the pillar up, filled it in, and then shoved rocks down that hole, that gap in between, and just to finish it off and have it really set.
Imagine building a wall, leaving a gap, continuing to build the wall.
On the other side, yeah.
Then you've got this T-pillar, and you go and you stand it up inside that gap. Now that the T-pillar's in the gap of the wall, there's extra space between the T-pillar and where the wall is. So you need to fill all that in with stone.
Exactly.
But when you build a wall that way, you're compromising its strength.
Yep.
And so it is part of the reason that it shows that these pillars
especially
come from a different phase.
Especially right next to that pillar is standing right next to the one socketed into the ground.
Right.
From in the bedrock. So why would they, if this was part of the original construction, have, or it's so obvious to me just looking at this that it's not, but you know, it's just more evidence showing that this was all done. All these walls were done way later.
You have these three interesting examples right by each other because you got
Yeah.
the big pillar socketed in the ground. You got the one pillar built with the wall like clearly propped up into a gap in the wall, and then the wall filled in. And then you've got another pillar right here, which shows a pillar upright on top of the wall, like it's actually being supported by the rock wall below it. And so if that's not evidence that the walls and the pillars came at different times, like I don't know what is.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious once you look at it and hear a little bit more of the evidence, or at least a new way to look at it.
Right.
Other than what's been told. Yeah, there's two of them right there.
Right, and they make really good, like, common sense points. Like, why wouldn't they just replace this pillar? They're clearly quarrying and transporting a bunch of pillars. So if this one's broken and they have to prop it on top of the wall, why didn't they just quarry a new one and replace it?
Exactly, and the fact that those ones aren't socketed next to one that is just pretty telltale too. Like, why would you just have one in the center and then have all these other ones scattered around, just misplaced?
Yeah. And then, so that's essentially the ups and downs of the talk. And then they move into talking about some of the actual iconography depicted on the pillars. So like the man bags, or like the bags, the H's, and the particular pose of like the arms coming around, like just above the belt, wrapping around from the side to the front. Yeah,
so some of these pillars are actually anthropomorphized into looking like a human or some sort of humanoid looking figure that has this belt with these H-shaped links in it with like, looks like a belt buckle and a pelt hanging down the front.
That does look like a belt buckle, but now that I'm thinking about it, I think this pelt is just hanging over the belt.
Right, it might be like a fox head.
Yeah.
You know, and then there's like the body of the fox is hanging down, covering his junk. And then he's got these like particular arm position where the arms come down to the side and wrap around the front right above the belt, and right around the navel. And these long, slender fingers that come over the, like, kind of turn the corner of the pillar, like where the knuckles would bend anyway.
Right. And then they make comparisons of this to the moai at Easter Island.
Yeah.
And they show some of the ones above ground, but it's kind of hard to see. So then they show some of the ones that actually had been buried, that there's less erosion on these moai because they were underground. And so this one, you can see they have a very, very similar stance.
With some sort of belt buckle.
Right. Some sort of belt buckle and the arms wrapped around. And then they show from Tiwanaku in Bolivia, another similar pose. This one doesn't totally ring totally similar to me.
It looks like they're holding two artifacts in their hand.
Yeah. It looks like the pose of holding things versus the pose of like holding your own stomach.
Yeah, for sure. But still similar.
Yeah. And then
they show some statues with erections.
Yeah. They do.
And their hands are right there, down by their thing.
But that's actually, I would say this is more similar than the last one.
Yeah, that one definitely looks more similar.
And then they show these ones from these are from Indonesia. This one also is playing with his, playing with his junk. And yeah, that's essentially where they go with it. It's a pretty good presentation. I really enjoyed it. They do such a good job of laying this out. We're doing a pretty rough review here. So again, this is no replacement for watching the video. Go check out Brothers of the Serpent on YouTube. And eventually all these videos will be on the Cosmic Summit YouTube too, I believe. So we'll let you guys know once those drop.
Yeah, I think last time it took a while actually.
All right, cool. We are over for another break, so let's get one of those in, and then we will be back in just a few. Welcome back.
All right, here we go now.
We are on the fourth and final segment of Duality Check.
Yeah, we kind of went through the ones that Dean had taken a lot of notes on, and I was here to just be funny. Maybe, I don't know.
So yeah, fill me in on this talk that you're just.
So I was going
through.
What was it? Adam Young, and he's with the Artifact Foundation, and he did a talk on these
The
ancient stone vases, and he talks about just like where when they found them, the dating that they're attributing to them, the level of precision in these things, and the dating that they have just right off the bat is just so weird, like the sequence dating that they do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll have an image. I don't have it up for you to see necessarily if you remember this, if you watched his at all. Is they categorize the vases based on their general look, but then they make this date range based on like the way that the archaeologists see the change in the vases over time. But they're basically saying that the more like the best looking vases are obviously the newest vases, but they're just flat out like that's the only way they're dating them, is they're saying that
just based on design,
on design, and whether it's good looking to better looking, or good looking to worse looking. So the newest stuff is the best looking stuff, the more polished, the more finished, I guess.
Did he mention like the difference between like the stone and the pottery? Because there's pottery vases that are painted to look like pink granite that some of the vases are actually carved out of.
Yeah, I know we talked about this before in that point, but I haven't heard him talk about it yet in this one. So you might go into that at the end, like trying to just disprove some of the theories of the archaeologists. But just off the dating, I thought that was really weird. I mean, not really weird, knowing how lazy they could be. Like, I mean, they're just attributing dates. Like, they're just putting dates on things without actually, like, there's no hard evidence. They're just, they're using their own brain, like
they've
their own
come
logic.
up with a technique that they feel is adequate to do this dating, but it's not actually hard proof because it's just based off of whatever idea someone had about how to categorize them, which I'm sorry, but if I make vases or pottery, like, I don't know, like I can make whatever shape I want. Like, it's not like I'm only capable of understanding certain shapes until 100 years later when my ancestors like, we should add a curve here, you know, like that doesn't make a ton of sense to me. And I would have to see like a detailed argument on like why they feel they can justify that. Cause doesn't sound right.
Well, and the thing is a lot of these are stone. So I think there's some of these that are like pottery.
There's some that are pottery, right.
And the ones that they're more intrigued by are these stone vases, these hard stone vases that can only be cut by things harder on the Mohs scale.
Technically, that's not exactly true.
Yeah, I mean they could be with certain certain levels or techniques. You can use like something similar hardness to cut it.
You can use something similar or even softer with certain techniques.
Right, with the techniques.
But your tool that you're using to do the grinding or the carving is going to grind down faster than the material you're working on.
Right.
And so you'll have to keep replacing your tool over and over and over and over.
And it will probably be less precise.
It will be much less precise.
So you can, if you're going to use or work with these really hard stones and shape them into these vases, like we'll have some images up by the time this episode comes out. But like even here, like these images, like there's the handles that protrude from the side that are unbroken from the surface. It wasn't like these were added later.
Right.
Like you can't think of just like shaving like over time and getting these precise measurements.
Well, yeah, when some of these vases are so precise and they look like they were lathed because of how precise they are.
Like, look at that.
But then they've got these like built-in handles popping off the edge, which then shows you it couldn't have been lathed, at least not the handle part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would have had to have been, I mean, in a lot of, so this topic specifically is about the Vaves, but there are other people that have their own theories and they do their own work on these Vaves to talk about the possibility of ancient technology and use the idea of having a lathe, an ancient lathe or something like that. But the level of precision is something that we find only in modern day in aerospace technology or certain things that need to be just ultra precise to function the way that they need to function.
Advanced machinery.
Yeah. Yeah. And the way,
or surveying equipment.
Right. So they use this structured light scanner now to get the exact dimensions of these vases, and they're within 1/1000th of a millimeter precise, like from like the deviations, like the leveling of it. Like if you see like a pottery or somebody who is not using precision, like the lip of a pottery, opening lip of a pottery, vase is not perfectly level usually.
Right.
Like where the exact same plane on one side of the opening is the exact same plane on the other. Like there's offsets.
Right.
But these are milled so precisely.
So let's say you're doing pottery and turning it on a wheel, right?
Yeah.
So you got a hunk of clay and you press it down onto your base that spins, right? Mm-hmm. You're going to have a flat base because of it sitting on a flat surface, right? That you're working it from. And then as you build up the shape of the pot, if you're turning it, you can get pretty good symmetry on like the vertical, but like there's going to be a vertical axis, right? So like the base is your horizontal axis, and then you're going to have a vertical axis that you can essentially imagine based off of the geometry going upwards, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're doing something by hand, that vertical is not going to be a perfect 90 degrees from your horizontal.
Base, yeah.
It's going to be like tilted,
leaned one way or the other.
A little.
You know, you put a little bit more pressure with your right hand than you do with your left hand or something, and it makes it just enough off, or even like wobble and come back, or you know, just a slightly but noticeable enough if you're using a structured light scanner.
Right. But with the structured light, you can detect the precision of these, and it's specifically many of these stone ones that are showing the precision.
Yeah, those are the ones that are showing the most precision. It's these emulated ones, the pottery ones that are painted to match these vases, to look like these vases, don't show the same level of precision. So these were done as mimics of the actual stone vases, which were likely valuable because of the workmanship put into them. Right.
Did he, I saw you had a slide with the statues. Did he talk about those?
Oh, yeah, yeah. So he was mostly talking about the material Greywacke. It's a type of stone, and they just you don't see it as much in pottery, but you see it in these sculptures. And I believe, I can't remember who they were, but either way, people, you know, are astonished by these sculptures, and these are stone sculptures that are crafted out of the same Greywacke as these stone vessels that they find. And this vessel has like a conical bottom that has a flat surface at the bottom to keep it flat, and then it comes up kind of like what you would see as like a wood bowl people use nowadays, but it has and then it curls around and has an inside lip as well, and then it funnels back down into the bowl shape on the inside.
Right. And the really inside lip would be extra challenging to do out of stone.
Right. Doing that and having the same kind of precision.
Yeah. Like it would be so easy to accidentally screw up an interior lip and crack the entire thing.
Yeah. And then you got these holes that are cut into the side. Some of them don't have holes to go all the way through, but these ones are drilled through on the handles.
Yeah.
Which, you know, you would imagine feed rope through.
Right.
And then matching bowls and stuff. They're made out of the same material. And so they found at least 40,000 just under the step pyramid of Saqqara. And he goes on to talk about how many more are probably out there, because the person who was finding, or who had all these, like in the stories, they say that they collected like hundreds of thousands of these artifacts or whatever, but they've only found 40,000. And there's all these other areas within the burial of them where they were all buried.
Yeah. Wasn't a giant chunk of them found under was it the bent pyramid, right?
Yeah. But these, at least 40,000 were under the step pyramid at Saqqara.
That's the one I was thinking of. Yeah.
Many thousand more were found in pre-dynastic Saqqara, Nubia, and elsewhere by archaeologists. He says that they are considered pre-dynastic by the academia. Egyptologists claim that these were made by hand with primitive tools. Time to make one stone vessel estimated to be years, not like to make one.
Yeah, and there's
years,
40,000 that we have.
Yeah, right. Plural.
Jesus,
like you got to be like this is a large group of people's everyday job. And then there's he did introduce an idea. I can't remember the exact wording he used, but the idea that you would imagine if it wasn't done all at one time, like you would assume like a pottery would be done at one time, like in one moment, like there would be there would be markers that tell you that this was a project that started and stopped over time. Like there would be evidence of the stopping of one day's work and the beginning of the next day's work.
Right. The tooling marks wouldn't necessarily match up from day to day.
Right. So there would be evidence of that.
Right. Right. You would get like slight misleveling. Yeah. Like,
and especially if there's multiple people working on it, like you would see totally different, artifacts that you would.
And presumably we would find some that aren't finished.
Right. Right. Yeah. Exactly. Especially if they're taking
years. Multiple years, there should be some examples of some that were started and not finished.
Mm-hmm. That's what you would think. Yeah. And then he presents some evidence of the pottery of the same time that's being dated to this roughly the same time period, plus or minus 100 years,
and showing the difference in precision.
So this is from. We'll have this image up too.
That's clearly handmade.
Yeah, and this is from Nakata and around 3400 BC, and the one on the right is also Nakata from 3500 BC, like within 100 years, and the older one is way better looking than the younger one.
It looks perfect compared to the newer one.
And it's made of stone, whereas this is not stone.
Right. Yeah, that's a big difference.
Huge.
That's night and day.
And so this is just to show that, like, to discredit the labeling of the time, like when these were made and stuff, is like, yes, like even they're saying it's old, the older ones are better. So the dating could continue to go back further and further.
Mm-hmm.
And then he does start to talk about, and he has these really cool graphics of Saqqara.
Mm-hmm.
And then he also has one of the Serpent.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where the granite burial vault was, like where they have all those giant granite coffins. I just thought that was a cool graphic showing all the different passageways and stuff, and like the narrow hallways, and
looks like a labyrinth down there.
And there was one main entrance stairwell going all the way down, and that there was this shaft built that goes all the way up to what they said is the second access, but they also called it the first robber's passage, which is disputed, but they said that's what they called it. Which it would make more sense as it being a second way in. Like you would never build down that far and not have another way in. Like if you're smart enough to build a place like this, like you would understand the principle of like not if there's a cave in, you would want a second shaft.
This is all underground.
All underground, yeah. Yeah. And then, so this is a little, I think I might have had. No, I didn't. So he goes to describe like what these would be worth, like how much money these would cost in today's, like to make.
One of the vases?
Yeah. Or not to make, but I guess just the value of it and how many of them. Because I guess he was talking about, this is back to where like there was one person who in history that went and collected all these and then brought them to where he was buried, and he was buried, like his whole place that he was buried in was just filled with these, and they were all buried with him. And these are lowballing numbers because he doesn't want to like just throw big numbers out there just because, but he talks about the US GDP per capita or per household. This would be a better one to have a clip for. So maybe, cause the way he talks about it, but we don't have to do that right now.
What's the time and video? I can cue it up while you keep talking.
Let me see when he starts this real quick. Right about, this is Yang day 2, I think.
Okay.
And then it's 55 minutes in.
Got it.
We'll skip ahead and we'll come back to that on the video when you have that ready. Oh, he talked about this site too. It's kind of like a megalithic stone, like standing stones. And it's kind of looks similar to Gobekli Tepe, and it's an Aniba. But a ton of those vases were found here. And there's also like these standing stones there that have these similar cobblestone walls built up around them.
That looks a lot like Gobekli Tepe.
Yeah, and this is Aniba. I can't remember where Aniba is.
All right, I got this portion here.
All right, let's listen to it.
Like, these things are valuable by any stretch of the imagination. And I heard the traditional timeline that they took years. What's the value of 1 year of a person's life, right? Like, a lot. So we actually do measure that today. Economists use something called GDP. So that's basically the output of an individual or a household. Per capita just means household. So in 2022, it was $76,000 in the United States. A skilled craftsman, though, I think would make more than that, maybe double that, 150. It's hard to say exactly. Now, the timeline, years. Well, more recent attempts have somewhat shown that in about 2 years, you could at least take a granite boulder and chisel it into something that looks like a round sort of semi-vase. So I'm going to go with 2 years for now. But remember, that's not accounting for the accuracy that we see, the hollowed out interior, the fact that some of these are ultra thin, like 1/8 of an inch thick. And it doesn't account for the job outs, the cast-offs, mistakes, things that you throw away in the midst of manufacturing that's going to add to this timeline.
Yeah, so this is when he was talking about how much it would cost to make one of these in today's time or money.
And he's being conservative, right?
Pretty conservative, although that gives us a value of about $6 billion, just the 40,000, according to these low estimates. But don't forget, there's a lot more. We have what Loyer found in just 2 years, the 40,000. And then we have the excavations before him, 18 years of that. We have the collapsed chambers. And then I didn't mention this, but this is an area that people had been living in for thousands of years. They knew this was there. There's a huge-ass building right in your backyard. So people knew this stuff was here. I think it's naive to think they never went down here and looked for anything. If we extrapolate and say, all right, well, what is it? Is it 40,000? Is it 80? Is it 100? I don't know. Any of those numbers are possible. And we're also lowballing the GDP. But we can get huge numbers here, like up to $100 billion almost. So to put that in perspective, same year, 2022, like Estonia, for instance, their output, their entire country outputted 38 billion. Or the world's richest human beings might be worth $30 billion, $50 billion. Can you imagine like the world's richest person taking his entire net worth and putting it in a tunnel that everybody knows about that's unguarded? Right? It makes no sense. So if Djoser was collecting these things.
Yeah, it was Djoser who was collecting them. So, yeah, and they found all of that was the person he was saying was collecting them beforehand. So there's the 40,000 they found under the step pyramid plus all the ones that he found. But there's collapsed areas where a lot of it was crushed, like a lot of the actual pottery and stuff was crushed, and there's fragments and even some of the stone. But yeah, there's like, that's just a, conservative number of what it might cost to manufacture that much.
Jesus, man. That's incredible. Right. Which just puts it just makes it incredulous that could be the case. Like that the modern or that the mainstream story is the correct story.
Yeah, so he goes on, maybe we'll end with his stuff here to show the vase making instructions. Basically, obtain a stone boulder, carve spherical body using dolerite, 6 pound, which is 6 on the Mohs scale, and then pounders and copper chisels, pierce top using copper tube drill and hard stone borer, place in hole or on work table, so in a hole or somewhere flat. Secure flint to forked stick, so it's kind of like a drill, like an ancient drill that they were using. That's described as them possibly using. Hold firm and rotate it in both directions to ensure the exact symmetry, which you'd have to put a bunch of tension on while you're holding it to make a straight line.
Right.
Polish using sand, emery, or hardstone, which he points out that emery is not something that they find there. You'd have to go to Malta, which is in the Mediterranean, to find that.
Which I mean, they clearly could have done.
Yeah, for sure. But still, it's not something that you would do if you're just like, you wouldn't do that if it's just like a like it's something, I don't know, I guess I don't know why you would make these vases at all, especially if they're going to.
It's a crazy thing to do just for some vases, right? So what it suggests is that they had a society and an industry and a technology that had these things available, right? If you're going to spend all that effort on some vases, like, clearly vases aren't the most important thing in life. Like a building is more important.
So if they're able to put that much effort into just the vases, imagine what kind of effort they put into other things.
Yeah. I mean, some of the vases are going to be seen very sacred, very important.
I was going to say, yeah.
You're talking the ones that like they're putting like people's organs in during the mummification process and burying with, but that's not where these are found. These are found in a giant cache.
Which they're saying Joser was responsible for. So he was grave robbing a bunch of these and stealing them. He was like an ancient archaeologist going around and stealing these things.
Yeah, I had heard from Ben too, not that I know him or anything, but in one of his videos.
He hit you up.
That it was sort of it's like a way to show off, like as a pharaoh, like thing. they would try to have some of these for themselves, and like that would go into different pharaohs
to show their importance.
It's like a status symbol.
Yeah. It's like having a Prada bag.
Yeah, right. No. Exactly. Like, who wants this crappy pottery? Yeah. Give me the good stone
Give
base
me the stuff that they took them 3 years.
I want that 1/8 of an inch thin.
Yeah, I want to be able to put stuff in it and see through it.
Yeah.
Because there are some that are like basically see-through.
Yeah, they're translucent.
They're so freaking thin and perfectly milled. And they use the type of stone and like the crystalline aspect of it, and you can see through these things.
Mm-hmm. And if you don't know, like the thinness of like making a vase out of stone that thin, you have to understand, like, rock is very hard, right? Like granite is very hard, but there's typically like a give and take with that. Balance, like the harder you are, also typically the more prone to like fracturing you are. And so like those vases are very easy when you're trying to make them as thin of it as 1/8 of an inch. It takes one wrong movement to just shatter the entire thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're doing this more than once. Like they're just continually doing these things.
40,000 times. Oh my God.
At least.
Conservative. That's conservative, right?
Really? Yeah.
Cool. Well,
I think that was a good amount of the Cosmic Summit.
Well, let me just talk about one more thing, because I also watched the panel discussion.
Yeah, sure.
And this will be quick because I don't have a ton to say about it. They basically got most of the speakers who were there up on the stage at the same time. I was hoping and looking forward to like them like queuing up some questions and then letting them loose to just talk to each other. But it was more of just
question and answer
Q&A, but with tons of people on stage.
Yeah. So you can pick who you want to ask the question to.
Yeah. The thing of note that came out of that for me was there was a little bit of debate happening between the CME solar theory versus the impact theory.
Oh, they actually got into it a little bit about that?
They did. And George Howard tried to like extend an olive branch to like Robert Schoch. And he's like, what do you think about like, okay, so all of us have a lot of common ground. We have this common ground in that we believe that human history goes way back. Civilization existed before this cataclysmic event. We're all pretty much on the same page there. Where we disagree is on the mechanism of the cataclysm itself.
Transformation, yeah.
Right? And can we just like call a truce between our different camps here and say
Focus on the things we.
the Younger Dryas, the onset of the Younger Dryas was caused by the sun, and the exit,
Ending event.
the ending was caused by the impact. And he asked that to Robert Schoch, and he's like, "No."
Yeah, because he wants.
I don't know
to-
how much of like the detailed context of the question Robert got out of that, because he's a little hard of hearing right now, and there was a lot of like reverb in the room, and so he had a hard time. But he just like, I think what he heard was him saying, "Well, the comet started and then the sun ended," and he's like, "No."
Yeah.
So he goes off and he starts talking about, well, here's the thing. According to him, pretty much all of the proxies and evidence that suggests a comet is also evidence that can suggest the solar event.
Right.
And so in his eyes, that is more likely what we're looking at. And the other thing he pointed out, which I haven't actually gone to his talk itself. His talk was right before the panel, but I was really interested in the panel because I was hoping they would like really converse with each other. So I really want to go check out his talk because he's brought up some interesting points. But one of the points is that what's the term they use? But like like all these the stones that you find in various vitrification is the term I'm looking for. The vitrified stones that you find in Egypt. So like in some of the ruins in Egypt look like things were literally blown apart. And when you look at the rock itself is vitrified. Like the outside surface is like damaged, like it's almost been melted or scorched.
Yeah.
And Robert proposes that as the probably like CME is responsible for that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That would have to be a really powerful CME.
Well, according to him, like they can get incredibly ridiculous. So I want to go into his full talk. So we'll probably cover that next week because that's going to be one of the first ones I like.
Hell yeah.
Dive into myself.
Yeah, I'll definitely give him a listen. I like Robert Schoch and the way he was helpful in the Sphinx stuff. And yeah.
I mean, it takes a lot of courage to stick your neck out there when everyone else is like so unwilling to go there. So
absolutely.
Regardless of whether or not he's right about the sun as the origin, and I don't know, like this is all still actively.
It's definitely possible.
This is all science that's still actively being studied. Oh, what I did find was interesting is also while they were talking about that, then after Robert finished his points, one of the Comet Research Group scientists piped in and was like, started asking him questions about like, would you see this type of evidence? Would you see that type of evidence? Like, are these things that can be caused by the CMA? And Robert was like, yeah, like to all of them. So I found that really fascinating.
Yeah, so I mean, it's really potato. It's really like we know that something cataclysmic happened. We know that there was a release of a lot of the fresh water and the ice that was released into the oceans, which raised the sea levels. And we know that from some of the evidence, or a lot of the evidence, that the Earth that rebounded once the ice was lifted. Some places sunk and some places rose more than others.
And all of that would be true regardless of the explanation, right?
Exactly.
And so, as much as I have so far been sold by the comet impact theory,
right?
There's no need to be married to that theory because, I mean, honestly, I don't want to be married to any theory anyway because it
could also be the electric universe.
We're accusing, science of being closed-minded and like getting married to an idea.
Exactly.
So regardless of what caused it, we're still talking about the same thing, which is some major dramatic thing changing the world. He's like, we're all catastrophists here, regardless.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
that's the thing to take out of it. And, it could be the electric universe theory where we were struck by lightning.
Yeah. But Robert was like,
solar storm.
He was like, no, that's not how science works. We don't work by compromise. Like, we don't compromise.
You don't just compromise on this stuff. Yeah.
If you follow the evidence, and
George just wants
if you're
everybody
proved
to be
wrong,
on the
then you're
same-
proved wrong, and you change your mind. But you follow the evidence.
I think George
I have
is looking
respect for that.
George is looking for vindication.
I think he's just looking to like continue to unite the group and get them to continue working together. You know. Because some people are looking on one avenue and others are looking on another, it doesn't mean they can't like work closely
Overlap.
Together, share data,
Which needs to happen. That's
Yeah.
where good science happens. So.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we're
That was a
gonna
fun
wrap
one.
this up for today. So if you want to check out all the images we're referencing, go to dualitycheck.net/episodes/28, or you just dualitycheck.net and you can click on episodes and then browse to that. Or in your podcast player, you can click the link to get to the website to take you there. We'll have links in the show notes of the podcast. We'll have images up on the YouTube. I know we referenced a lot of photos this time, so you're going to want to make sure you have some visual aids to follow along with.
Yeah, if you started on, or even if you go through it all and you want to come back around and see some of the visuals, we'll have it on YouTube and Rumble. And for the most part, a lot of that stuff will go in on the podcast apps too, that it can be visualized.
Yes. Depending on the podcast app, a lot of the podcast apps
Spotify.
don't support the chapter art. But
Apple.
if it's not there, I usually link all my images in the show notes too.
Yeah, so you can click on them. If you want it while you're watching it, YouTube, Rumble is probably the best bet.
YouTube, Rumble, or just pull up the website and you can scroll it while we're talking about it.
Yep.
Anyway, give us a like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. Also, if you can share one of your favorite episodes to your social media, to your friend group or whatever, it would really help our channel grow. All those types of things help YouTube know that people are interested, and it helps us get more eyeballs on our content.
Keep the comments coming. We want to interact. And
Yeah.
for Dangerous, I think it was Dangerous Daniel. Is that what your name was? I can't remember now.
I don't remember off the top of my head now.
But thank you for the comment. And we'd love to know what other, if you're still listening, we'd like to know what other information you got on that 26-27 event.
Right. Cool.
All right, y'all.
We will see you guys a week.
Have a good one. Bye.
Adios.